Tonight from Blackpool, Labour's great debate, eye to eye and facing an audience of trade unionists, the three contenders for the title of Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. Listen and judge who should help Michael Foot lead Labour into the next election. Winter Gardens, Blackpool, earlier this evening. Venue for this week's meeting of the TUC, and the latest stopping place for Labour's summer spectacular, the Deputy Leadership Show. Tonight, at a fringe meeting, organised by the Labour journal, The New Socialist, delegates will have a chance to listen to the three men whose campaigns have made this the summer of Labour's disagreement. Tonight is the first time that Silkin, Healy and Benn have come together on the same platform since the battle was joined. Nothing has been done by brotherly agreement. Everything has been left to chance. Their places on the platform, the order of speaking, even of answering questions, were chosen by lot. Tony Benn set the debate in motion.
This is the first meeting ever held since the Labour Party adopted universal adult suffrage for itself. And it's appropriate that it should be held at the TUC because it's also the first time that the trade union members affiliated to the party have had an opportunity of voting for the leadership of the party. And before I come on to what the election is about, may I say what the election is not about? It is not a conflict between individuals because 2.5 years ago, the three of us served in the last Labour cabinet, and 2.5 years from now, indeed I hope long before that, we shall be serving together in the next Labour cabinet. It is not about the position of Michael Foot, and if anybody raises that, may I point out, as I must, that I'm the only one of the three candidates who voted for him in both ballots last November, and that is not an issue. It is not about whether the Labour Party is in favour of parliamentary democracy. The whole trade union and Labour movement and Labour Party in Britain, including the Young Socialists, are wholly committed to socialism by consent. And I know of no one in the party who wants to take away the vote, who wants to prolong the life of Parliament, or who wants to achieve power by violence. And it is a grave error of judgment and grossly damaging to the party to suggest otherwise.
Tony Benn then moved on eloquently to set out his policies of unilateral disarmament, opposition to the common market, and social equality.
Now, it is not enough to be anti-Tory. If we are anti-Tory, we are giving the electors three choices: vote Labour, vote SDP, or vote Liberal. We must be constructive, and we cannot go back to 1979, to the policies of wage restraint, which I might remind you, and you know very well, not only undermined the Labour government, but undermined the role of the trade union movement, because trade union officials were agents of government policy rather than representatives of the membership. Now, I believe in the constitution of the Labour Party, which also is about incomes, to secure for the workers by hand or by brain the full fruits of their industry and the most equitable distribution thereof as may be possible on the basis of the common ownership of the means of production, distribution and exchange. We cannot go back to the IMF limits on public expenditure, because the world bankers will give us their confidence to the extent that we abandon our policies. And the winter of discontent was a special sort of siege economy fashioned by the IMF and imposed upon a Labour cabinet. We cannot go back to the common market support agreed by a majority of the Labour cabinet in March 75, or to nuclear rearmament, because if we try to go back to those policies, I tell you, this party will be in the wilderness for a generation. And what we have to decide is how we are to get that election victory and carry the policy through. We must agree on our policy at the TUC and the Labour Party. We must select candidates for Parliament and in the leadership who wish to carry it out. And I might add, what's Blackpool been all about if the people who voted this week aren't interested in whether the policies are implemented or not? And we must make our representatives accountable. Now, that is what the Electoral College and reselection is all about. And in my opinion, the changes are long overdue. How is it that since 1906, we've had a Labour Party where the individual members and the affiliated members of affiliated unions have not been allowed to choose parliamentary candidates except once, or the parliamentary leadership at all? And now we can choose, and it is natural to want candidates at every level who support the policy. Now, this election campaign has brought key issues out for discussion. It's been a deeply important and serious discussion, though you wouldn't know it from reading the press. And this discussion has been neither infantile, nor trivial, nor divisive, because we have got to bring out and discuss how we are to advance the interests of working people in this country, in Europe, and in the world. And if we stick to our policies and unite around them and are free to discuss how they should be developed, if we campaign for them, we shall win a landslide victory, as we did in 1945. And if we stay close to the movement and we stand up to the enormous pressures that will be put upon us and we carry them out, we shall change the prospects for millions of people who look to us to safeguard their interests. And that was what the Labour Party was set up to do. And it is upon our shoulders that the responsibility lies to do it, and do it in our own lifetime, for there may not be much time left. Thank you very much.
A very typical Tony Benn performance, professing to be more hurt than angered by the attacks upon him, but pulling no punches in his outline of radical policies, and plugging again his ever-recurring theme that party leaders must be accountable to the rank and file.
Colleagues, thank you, Tony Benn. The next speaker, Denis Healey. Denis?
Mr. Chairman, comrades, this is not a contest for leadership of the Labour Party, although some people act as though it were. We already have a first-rate leader in Michael Foot, and no one who heard his magnificent speech to Congress on Tuesday can doubt that. This is a contest to choose the best man fitted to work with Michael Foot as his deputy, and Michael has made his own views on that crystal clear in the last few days. I worked with Michael Foot in the last Labour government with the trade union movement more closely than every other minister, and I worked with him for the last 12 months, and I shall work with him till we win the next election. Our party can't be united unless it remains what it always has been till now, a broad coalition of men and women from all sections of our society, supporting many different approaches to democratic socialism, who tolerate their disagreements with one another and defend the right of minorities to fight for changes in the policies they disagree with. The right of dissent is fundamental to unity in any democratic movement. But even a united party can't win a majority in a general election unless it represents the attitudes and aspirations of the broad mass of working people. It's no excuse for defeat in a general election to say, as a party leader once said in Blackpool, the play was a great success, but the audience was a failure. And what disturbs me about some of the views expressed during this contest is the profound distrust and even contempt which they reflect about the ability of average men and women to take sensible decisions about anything. Now, comrades, leadership in a great democratic movement like ours makes heavy demands on those who have to exercise it. A leader will be judged by the actions of his followers, unless he disavows them. And a party will be judged by the actions of its leaders. That's what makes this contest so important. I don't believe the party gains when a member of the last two Labour governments stumps round the country, blackguarding the record of the governments as a betrayal of the British working class, and describing the prime ministers from whom he accepted office as medieval monarchs who turned Labour MPs into their puppets. What nonsense. Tell that to Eric Heffer or Jeff Rooker or any of the many Labour MPs who've made my life as Chancellor so difficult from time to time, and I never objected to that. No, those who betray the working class of Britain are those who forced us for 2 whole years to fight one another when we should have been fighting the Tories, and through a sort of ideological narcissism are helping to keep in power the most brutal government in living memory, a government which has committed itself to destroy our trade union movement. We didn't lose the last election because we failed to follow the advice of these elitists. It was Maggie Thatcher who won the last election, not Mick Magahey. And we're losing votes today, not to the Socialist Workers' Party or the IMG, but to David Steele and Roy Jenkins. Now, comrades, nothing said in Congress this week will matter a damn unless we win power at the next election. And that means depending on the support of others. Len Murray was right when he said the other day that the TUC will not be interested in a Labour Party which has condemned itself to wander in the wilderness. But the Labour Party means more than power. Our fathers and grandfathers have made it the most sensitive and efficient machine for social change anywhere in the world. But they also made it a community of brothers and sisters dedicated to make brotherhood a reality in society as a whole and the world as a whole. We must pass that party on to our children, strengthened and developed to meet the challenges that lie ahead. We must show the younger generation now moving into council work, into trade union branches, into candidacies, that we have kept the party which we inherited, a party of humanity and common sense, and that is the challenge which lies behind the contest in this election.
Denis Healey there, pugnacious as ever and prepared to lead with his chin in order to whack home his right hook, and much happier now that Michael Foot has made clear his own opposition to Tony Benn.
Thank you, Denis. The next speaker is John Silkin. John?
Mr. Chairman and comrades, however or whyever this election came about, the task for us now is to unite, and to unite with Michael Foot as leader, to win the next election and to set the seal for a democratic socialist government which will last at least to the end of the century. That's the task. My own decision to stand in this election was decided because a number of people throughout the movement who refused to be labelled Bennite or Healyite wished to make the distinction known. People who find it impossible to view Tony Benn or Denis Healey as the personification of absolute good or absolute evil. People who resent having their credentials as Democrats and as socialists challenged merely because they will not support one or other warring sector. I believe I represent a majority in the party who have sensed that there is one vital obligation upon the parliamentary leadership, particularly upon the leader and the deputy leader, which neither Tony Benn nor Denis Healey are equipped to carry out. That obligation is to get people to work together in the development and implementation of party policy and in attacking the Tories, to encourage tolerance and to insist upon room for dissent, to pull the party together, not to tear it apart. The unique thing about the Labour Party has been its ability to embrace a wide range of views, to allow those views to be forcibly expressed without bitterness, and to remain a coherent electoral force. Our insistence on being an open democratic party rooted in the trade union movement, but attracting support from far beyond it, has sometimes led to criticism that we've lost sight of the socialist objectives set by our pioneers, that we're dominated by bureaucratic trade unions, and that we lack reliable, vigorous leadership. The claims heard today, well, it's an occupational hazard for anyone in the collective leadership of the Labour movement. I well recall reading the assertion that it's difficult for the Labour Party, under a self-effacing leader, a modest leader, to be the dynamic instrument of any fundamental change. That was the charge levelled by the New Statesman in February 1943 against Clement Attlee. Nevertheless, we went on to win the election of 1945, and we made the greatest move forward in our history. So the best leaders are not always the dominant, extrovert personalities, the folk heroes. In our present circumstances, I believe that I possess three qualities which the deputy leader requires. First, I've been a consistent advocate of Labour Party policy in government and in opposition. Second, as a trade union-sponsored MP for nearly 20 years now, I believe I have an understanding of the trade union movement, which is vital in office as well as in opposition. Finally, and most important of all, I have a record as a conciliator within the party, and it allows me to claim that more than either of my rivals, I could heal the party's wounds, bring people together to work for the Labour cause, and do so without provoking a resentful minority. And that is the paramount task for today. Britain needs a Labour government. We need to rebuild our industry. We need to get our people back to work. That's what party policy should be about. To do this, Mr. Chairman, to do this, comrades, we must put an end to faction, and we must work together in a united Labour movement. And it is because I believe this and am prepared to fight for it that I'm standing in this election.
John Silkin putting himself forward as the unity candidate and the man to heal Labour's wounds while advancing his own impeccable left-wing credentials. Next, the three candidates faced wide-ranging questions from the audience.
Chairman, during this contest, there's been a great deal of concern expressed about the candidates' views with regard to the role of the Member of Parliament in a parliamentary democracy. And I would like to ask each of the candidates before us today to express and develop their view on the role of a Member of Parliament in a parliamentary democracy.
A Member of Parliament not only has to represent his constituency and his people, he's also got to give his own conscience and his own judgment. And I hope and trust that that is what will be preserved. I believe in the majority of cases it will be preserved. There'll occasionally be cases where it won't be. That'll happen. But then it's happened that there have been the occasional, I believe very occasional, Member of Parliament who's not actually been the best possible servant of his own party and his own constituency. But I tell you this, the best thing to do is to have a party which is bent upon changing society, members of Parliament who are bent upon changing society, and members of Parliament who are not afraid to dissent from the general view if it is really what they believe, and they should never, never, never be afraid to say so.
Well, like most of us, we've got lots of responsibilities. to the party as a whole when we join it, to the GMC that selects us, to the electors that elect us, to the trade union, in my case the Transport and General Workers Union, of which I'm a member, to the Parliamentary Labour Party, to the National Executive, to the Shadow Cabinet or Cabinet, and to your conscience. And of course there are a lot of responsibilities. But in the end, the local party has got to have the right to choose. I've fought and won 12 parliamentary elections in Bristol South East. And it's not until November this year that I shall come up for re-selection with another candidate or more than one candidate, and the proper way to assess the role of members of Parliament is by mandatory re-selection with more than one candidate, if another is nominated, at his re-selection conference. Now, having said that, I say one other thing too, which is that political power has always rested outside Parliament. Was the King, the landowners, the Tories have never been embarrassed about mobilising their extra parliamentary forces when they want to embarrass a Labour government, and parliamentary democracy must mean a partnership between the power of elected members and the people in the movement as a whole.
I think the problem here is the one that Tony and John just mentioned. I'm responsible to my constituency party, which re-selected me the other day, and nobody stood against me. It wasn't a short list of one, only because nobody else stood against me. And my local party supports me on nearly all my views, but by no means always. I'm responsible to my union, and that, I think, agrees with me on nearly all my views. I sometimes disagree with the parliamentary party, I sometimes disagree with conference. But we've got to have MPs with the right to do that, because otherwise the public will not elect a man whom they regard as a puppet of decisions which were taken in perhaps quite different circumstances 3 or 4 years earlier.
Why do we need to have a deputy leader of the Labour Party at all? Mike?
Joe Haynes wants to know, why do we need a deputy leader of the Labour Party? Tony.
Well, I must say, Joe Haynes works for the Daily Mirror, and when I read them, I wonder why we have a leader, because the Daily Mirror wants to run the country, and I don't think that's a very sensible question. But the short answer is, and I was at the Labour conference, Herbert Morrison was thrown off the National Executive Committee by the rank and file, so they invented a deputy leadership, and they put him back ex officio on the National Executive. That's how it all began.
It's far better to have one leader and one deputy leader in the Labour Party than 4 blooming leaders and 4 blooming deputy leaders in the Social Democrat Party.
Questions done, the candidates were invited to sum up.
And we are going back to our roots. We're going back to our roots because the tree of capitalism is rotten and is falling and will bring us down with it, with chronic mass unemployment, the destruction of the welfare state, and the threat to world peace. And people look to us to give them hope. And all I plead of my colleagues in this debate, don't attack the party in order to get support. Don't say things about the party that aren't true in order to win support for the deputy leadership. Because all of us have got to work with the Labour Party on October the 28th, and we must bring out what is best, build on the hope that is in the hearts and minds of our members. And when we have hope, then others will follow. But if we destroy what we're about, which is socialism and is democracy, how can anyone follow us in our claim to lead this country to a fair and just society?
This Labour movement of ours is a brotherhood or it is nothing. The whole basis of our policies throughout the years since we existed has been that our job is to bring the brotherhood of man that bit closer in our economic and social life. We shall not persuade people outside this hall that we are sincere about this objective unless we behave as brothers to one another. And it is no good denying that there are sections of our movement where the spirit of brotherhood has not been seen in recent months. And I believe that that is a factor which will weigh very strongly in the minds of those who finally cast their votes for the deputy leader of the Labour Party.
I've never for one moment regretted that Labour Party audiences always think every time that a Labour government has let them down. That's what's known as aspirations. No Labour member should ever have a horizon. There is no horizon to democratic socialism. You must always look ahead, and whatever a government may do, your government, whatever it may do, always look ahead and see that people come with you. But having said that, let's do it together. And if any of us is under any illusion, let us also face up to reality. The reality is we have not yet got, as Michael said, the hearts and minds of our people. Let that be our job from this day forth. We haven't got much time, but I believe that working together, we can do it.
The speeches are done. There is no more to be said. The rest is lobbying. Promises will be made and weighed. In the final outcome, logic will count for rather less than the block votes cast by the few on behalf of the many. The showdown is on the first day of the Labour Party conference in Brighton on Sunday, September 27th. By then, only one candidate will still enjoy the applause.